Hello, welcome to the show. Not gonna sit and waste a lot of time. We're gonna jump right into it. I've got a Bible study, but it's more than that, and you'll probably see where I'm going with it. Don't want to waste a whole lot of time, so let's go. So I've got a copy of the Bible right here. One thing that a lot of people don't understand is the Bible itself is a contract book between God and man, or a covenant, or it's even a trust book. When you look at the word law, it's an acronym. It stands for land, air, and water. Okay, you have the law of the land, have the law of the air, have the law of the sea. The law of the land is common law. That's if you're born in the land, then you ruled under the law of the land. Air law or ecclesiastical law is trust law. That's the highest form of law. The water would be the law of the sea. That is also called admiralty law, and that's really kind of where I'm going with this whole thing. But I guess I'm gonna sometimes in order to go forward, you have to go back a little bit. So I'm going back to the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26. God says, "Then God said, let us make a man, someone like ourselves, to be master of all earth to be master of all life upon the earth, and in the skies and in the seas." You have earth, sky, sea right there. Okay, so God's basically saying in the first chapter of the first book of the Bible that we are to take dominion over all life and everything on earth. Okay. So in verse 27, it says, "So God made man like his maker. Like God did God make man. Man and maid did he make them, man and woman." Okay? In God's eyes, there is no weaker species or weaker woman. It's just man and woman. They're both equal. They have different strengths and weaknesses. And God blessed them and told them, "Multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. You are masters of the fish and birds and all the animals. And look, I have given you the seed-bearing plants throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. And I've given you all the grass and plants to the animals and birds for their food." Then God looked over all. It was the sixth day, and he was happy with that. Okay, but if you look back here, it says, "And multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. You are masters of the fish, the birds, and the air." So God is saying you are masters over everything. You, mankind, man and woman, are the masters of all life on earth. All right? You've heard it said before, God is a King of Kings, or Jesus is a King of Kings. Who's he talking about? Was he king of slaves? Was he King of Kings? Yes. Okay. All right, so that's just a starting point, right? A lot of people believe that the Old Testament is very harsh and full of rules and regulations, and God was mean, and in the New Testament, Jesus came and was really cool and laid back, hippie Jesus. And all those premises are wrong. God has never changed, not one time out of the whole entire existence of mankind has God ever changed. He's always the same. The Jesus we see in the New Testament that's preached in a lot of churches is a watered down, groovy, good old buddy, type of Jesus who is very weak, and you've seen what the church has done with that. The church has gotten extremely weak. They've allowed every kind of perversion under the sun to take root, and they're just cool with it, because they always say, "What would Jesus do?" If you read the New Testament, you'd see what Jesus would do, but they don't. They cherry pick things. But that's not what I'm talking about. The Old Testament, like I said, sometimes in order to go forward, you have to go back a little bit. So we're going back to the very beginning. The book of Exodus is one of the best books in the entire Bible, and we get a lot of our foundation, who we are, because of that book. And I'm not gonna read a whole lot, but I'm just gonna get you up to speed. After Jacob came to Egypt, and Joseph was basically the second commander of all of Egypt, Israel started to grow and it got really, really big. Okay, and over a period of several hundred years, the Egyptians put them in slavery because they had gotten so big and so powerful, and the Egyptians were afraid if they didn't continue to keep them busy, the Israelites busy, then they would become powerful and throw the Egyptians over. Okay, And the reason Israel was so blessed was because of the covenant God had made with Abraham. And it went down to Isaac and then Jacob. And Jacob had a bunch of wives, and he was really busy making babies for a long time with 4 different women. Going to not comment on that. But anyway, Israel got to be a big, big, big nation, but they had no home of their own. And God had promised they would have a home of their own, but when you first read Exodus, they're in bondage in Egypt and getting treated like crap. Well, then Moses comes along, and Moses was to lead Israel out of Egypt. Pardon me. Pharaoh didn't want to let him go. Pharaoh was the king of Egypt, did not want to let him go. And you know the story about the plagues and all that kind of stuff. So finally, King Pharaoh said, get out, take your stuff, take whatever you want, just go. And so they did. And so, you know what happened after that? That God led them to the Red Sea, parted, Israelites walked across on dry ground. Pharaoh's armies chased after them. They got slaughtered, and when the water went back, and Egypt has never been the same since. Okay, well, after that, that's all happens in the first 12, 13 chapters of Exodus. Well, when things start getting really, really rigid and regulated and a whole lot of rules come into play, that's where a lot of things go wrong, okay? And if you read through it with an objective mind and understand what's going on here, it's not harsh at all. God treated the Israelites harshly, but it's because he had to. He led them around the wilderness for 40 years. Why? For one, they were disobedient. They had been slaves for a long time. They all whined and cried about wanting to go back to Egypt where things were nice. So they were comfortable in their slavery. Even though they hated it, they were comfortable in it. So God had bigger plans for them. He knew what he had created them to be, and so he had to basically beat the slave out of them. And when you go over here to the 19th chapter of Exodus, I'm going to read a little bit of this. Okay, this is after Egypt has let Israelites go. The Israelis arrived in the Sinai Peninsula 3 months after the night of their departure from Egypt. After breaking camp at Rephidim, probably said that wrong, they came to the base of Mount Sinai and set up camp there. Moses climbed in the rugged mountain to meet with God, and from somewhere in the mountain, God called to him and said, give these instructions to the people of Israel. Tell them, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I brought you to myself as though in eagle's wings. Now, if you will obey me and keep your part of my contract with you, you shall be my own little flock from among all the nations of the earth, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be a kingdom of priests to God, a holy nation. Okay? And so this happens a lot in Exodus, and every time the Israelites did something God didn't like, he'd punish them with a plague or something, or they'd wipe some of them out. A lot of bad things happened. And a lot of people don't understand, if God's a loving God, why is he allowing his people, his chosen people, to be treated this way? Why would he treat them this way? And it's because, for those of you who have been in the military, specifically the Marine Corps, you understand that when you go to boot camp at Parris Island or San Diego, you get treated really bad for like 3 months, okay? You're worn out, you're tired, people are yelling at you constantly, you're always getting, your whole entire life is interrupted, okay? And you're bewildered, and you don't understand what's going on. It's better back home, but yet here you are, and you're trying, and at some point you don't even know why you're there anymore. You're tired of it, you're tired of getting screamed and yelled at, you don't understand anything that's going on, all you want is to be over with. And then one day, it happens right around about a month before you graduate, little by little you start to click, and things start coming together, and it builds you up, and you feel invincible, and you feel like you can take on the whole world and win because of what you've been through, and all those drills, and all the hiking, and all the humping, and all the everything, just the constant stress has made you stronger, tougher, and better unit, okay? Well, Israel's the same way. They had 12 tribes. All right, and so Moses was their leader. Moses was a total jackass. He was, if you read this Bible and read about Moses, Moses was not a nice guy at all. He didn't have that luxury because he was dealing with complainers all the time, and he's talking straight to God. God said, "I'm going to wipe these people out," and Moses like begging, "Don't wipe them out. If you do, it'll all the world will see that you brought your people out of Egypt just to kill them in the wilderness. What good will that do?" And so it reads as if Moses is able to persuade God. God's in control the whole time. He knows what Moses is going to say before he ever says it. But it's cool to read this way and see that Moses is constantly going between God and the Israelites. Okay, so Moses was an amazing leader, but he wasn't a nice guy. And most good leaders are not nice people because they don't have that luxury. You have to be hard on these people. So, reason I said all that is not to give you a cool little Bible story about God leading the people out of the wilderness, because as you know, if you follow the Bible or God at all, you know that Israel went on to be a great nation. The entire Old Testament, especially the book of Joshua, they're wiping everybody out. They're taking the entire cities out. Sometimes God took the people out before they ever got there. Okay. And a lot of people think that was harsh also, but it wasn't, because these people living in the promised land were an abomination to God for reasons we don't know. But we also know there were a lot of things that happened as far as before the flood of Noah with fallen angels who gave birth to, they basically had sex with human women and produced an entire race of hybrid humans, okay? And we could go really deep into that, but that's not the point. Anyway, a lot of speculation is, from people I've listened to before, is that a lot of those, the Bible does say that the giants were on the earth before the flood and then after the flood too. So, and we know that some of the kings in these areas that the Israelites wiped out were in fact giants. King Og was one. He was over 13 feet tall, according to what the Bible says. So we had a lot of non-humans in these areas, and the ones who were human were worshiping false gods. So God said, I'm not going to have this mess. We'll wipe them all out. So he had them all destroyed. And so Israel went on to be a great nation until they rebelled against God, and then they were broken apart and sent off to Babylon for a long, long time. So this is what God does. If he's called you to be special, called you to be different, it may be harsh on you. He's not promising you a life of luxury where you're going to sit in his lap like a fat little puppy and just sit there and be. He expects you to do something. He created us in his image. He expects us to actually do something, not just sit around and wait for him, which is part of the problem I have with the modern day American churches. They just want to sit there with their sanctimonious attitudes and act as if it's peaceful and calm and quiet, and God just wants you just to sit back and wait for him, and that's not what God wants you to do at all, which gets me into my next point. I told you the story about the Israelites in the desert and how God had to beat the slavery out of them because they were so kept and so weak and so they had a slave mentality. Most people who've been slaves, they don't know any other life but slavery. They had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Okay, so again, I told you this wasn't necessarily a Bible story or a Bible lesson. So where we're at right now in the world, we can say the whole world, but I'm going to narrow it down to the U.S. because that's where we live. That's where I live. That's where most of my viewers live. And we're kind of the genesis of the whole thing here because God made a covenant with the founding fathers, by all accounts, that this was going to be a great nation. This is what America was to become. And I do realize some of the founding fathers were not necessarily born-again Christians. They were Gnostics. They might have been atheists. They might have been something else. But if you read all the founding documents, they all gave credit to God, nature's God, a higher power than themselves, okay? And so what people don't understand is, even though we believe we have rights, we are U.S. citizens, we are, you can't tell me what to do because I know my rights. Hardly anybody knows their real rights. And the reason that is because we're under a form of slavery ourselves, okay? And we put ourselves there. We allowed it to happen. None of us living today started it, but we've grown up in this system that we didn't realize was a counterfeit to what we're supposed to be living in. And so we have a nation full of weak people. Part of it is because of the fact that we've lived such a good life because of the successes and hard work of previous generations. So we're living on the tail end of great success, and so did Israel. After King David died and Solomon took over his kingdom, Israel was so filthy rich that silver had zero value. It was a junk metal. They didn't care about it because they had so much. God bless them incredibly well, but they couldn't handle all that wealth and fame and fortune. They got fat, happy, and lazy. Next thing you know, their country was being invaded, and the Babylonians took them to Babylon and made them slaves out of them, and took all their stuff. So history always repeats itself, and here we are in the year we're living in, this time we're living in, and you see everything around us falling apart. And that's what happens when you disobey God's basic commandments. This entire book, I told you, is a trust document. It's a covenant. It's a contract book. And it basically says to do this or do that, and this will happen. Otherwise, these will happen. And everybody looks at, a lot of non-Christians and Christians alike, look at Christianity as being a whole bunch of rules to follow and a bunch of don'ts and do nots. And that's not because God wants you to be miserable. This is the opposite. He wants you to thrive and be happy and be content, but he also wants you to be strong and to be who he created you to be, because God didn't create us to be a bunch of, like I said, a bunch of lap dogs sitting in his lap getting fat and happy. That's not what he created us to be. But we have forgotten that. And what I was getting at earlier, I get sidetracked a little bit, but I'm actually doing a pretty good job keeping on point, because I'm trying to compare back then to now. We ourselves live under a form of slavery. We don't have the rights we think we have. We live under corporate rule. The U.S. Government is a service corporation. It has a Dun & Bradstreet number. Your local city and county and state are all part of that same corporation. And if you read the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, it basically spells out that you, in fact, are a servant of the corporation, okay? Because free men and women have rights, and servants and slaves have privileges. Go read the 14th Amendment. It was never actually legally ratified anyway, so it doesn't really apply. Well, it does apply because we don't know any better. But we're living in a system of slavery. It might be a good form, but it's still slavery. And everything you ever thought you knew about this country, especially since 1871, has been a lie. They've been lying to you nonstop, and they know it. They've made trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars off of us. And it's all based off contract law, which is the law of the sea, admiralty law. Like I told you, if you're born on the land, you should be ruled under common law, which is basically the Ten Commandments. Do no harm to others. Don't steal. Don't cheat somebody. Don't kill. That's what common law is. It's not even a written law. It's just your honor against my honor. Like if I own land and my neighbor owns land and he or she encroaches on me and plants something on my land without my permission, then I have the right to do something about that. Okay, that's an injury to me, an injury or harm in some kind of way, whether it be someone stabs me or shoots me, or whether someone steals from me. That's an injury done to me. Okay, but what we're dealing with in what we're at now is everything's corporate law. Okay, which is the law of the sea. We're basically being ruled by piracy. That's what traffic courts are. That's what all civil courts are. That's what your representatives in Congress do. They're all in on it. They don't represent you. I'm sure you yourself have said, or you've heard other people say, that I feel like we don't have any representation at all. It's because you don't. Okay, your vote means absolutely nothing. These congressmen and senators do not answer to you. They work for the company. And you also work for the company, even though you think you're a private citizen. You're not, because you have a birth certificate, and the birth certificate was put on you when you were born, before you had a right to understand what was in it. It's a contract. It basically creates a dead entity or a vessel out of you. Your all caps name. Anytime you see that on a driver's license or social security card, military ID, birth certificate, everything is in all caps letter. And somewhere on that document, there'll be a series of numbers. Okay, that's a CUSIP number. That's what creates your bond. And there are different amounts, But usually, I think now they're bonded for like $1 million and insured for $2 million. And those names and birth certificates are traded on the open markets. So your name is probably worth millions and millions of dollars, and you might be living in a shack somewhere or a single wide trailer with no heat and air conditioning because you have no money. Meanwhile, you're worth millions, but you don't know it. Okay. And I didn't know it either. I've learned this over the last couple of years. I've always known something was up because I used to run a uniform rental route to a city of somewhere, and so I had to go in these buildings and these offices and stuff, and I started thinking to myself, this place runs just like a business. This is supposed to be a public, government entity here, services for the people, but yet they are running a business here. And then you see, city of whatever it was, incorporated. Well, it is a company. I used to live down in near Charlotte in Concord, and all our power and our water and our trash pickup all came from the city of Concord, incorporated. So it got me thinking one day, I'm paying a water bill, I'm paying a I'm paying a power bill because the city of Concord has its own power company, but yet it's a government institution. And I started thinking about this. So I'm paying tax money to fund a system that's building a service corporation to sell me a product. So I'm paying for it twice. So if it was real government and I'm paying money to this entity for power, for taxes, then power should be free if that services they offer, right? Right, but it's not because it's a corporation. And you can look all this stuff up. Every single corporation in the entire world has a Dun & Bradstreet number. That's basically a credit reporting agency for corporations. And that's where you find out. You can find out their information, and you can do lots of things with that. You can, if you know what you're doing, you can file claims against their bonds, their companies, their insurance for any kind of constitutional right they violate. Now, you kind of need to know what your rights are, and that's why it's going to be kind of up to you, because I've been doing a whole lot of reading and researching, and there's a lot of remedies, but the whole point of this thing was to show that we as Americans have to shoulder a lot of the blame for where we're at right now. We've ruined our kids. Not necessarily we have ruined our kids, we've allowed society to ruin our kids because we've had distractions of social media since, 1996 when AOL came around, something like that. From that point on, we've been addicted to telephones and internet and everything that goes along with that, social media, everything, okay? And so we've been distracted. So the technology gets better, they feed it to us to keep us happy and distracted while they're destroying society all around us. And then we get to the point we're at right now, and we've almost lost everything. And we kind of need to go through what we're going through in order to come out the other side. We're like the Israelites in the wilderness. We're marching around in the sand, mile after mile, day after day, whining and complaining, grumbling, and pissed off because mean old Moses is just walking us in circles trying to kill us all. And really it's God saying, hey, you people, I need you to remember who you are and come away from this system. When you hear about Mystery Babylon, the Babylonian system, that's what we're in. That's what the corporation posing as the United States government is. It's Babylon. It's the system, not necessarily a city. It's more esoteric than that. It's or abstract, whatever you want to say. I like to use fancy words sometimes, so I feel like I'm smart. But you look at the U.S., you look at Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, all of Western Europe. That's where we're at. We are that system, okay? People want to say that Russia is the bad guys. And I know people right now, this is 2023, I know people right now who still think Russia's a communist country. And I remember distinctly, communism fell in the Soviet Union collapsed in like 1991 or something like that. I was on active duty when it happened. So they got rid of the commies. What happened to the commies? They all came here. If you look back to the early 20th century, with the Bolshevik Revolution and the Nazis in Germany, they're all pretty much the same people. And that's who is That's who is in charge of our societies right now, in the school boards, the school systems, all the weird stuff that's going on right now. I have to be careful what I say, because then I'll sure enough get this thing flagged. But all the stuff going on in this country right now, if you're paying attention, then you can look back at Germany in the 1930s and see the exact same thing happened. Same thing happened in the Soviet Union. They were godless heathens because they were being controlled by a group of people who aren't who they say they are. I'm gonna leave it at that, okay? But it's all right here. So it's all right here. If you don't believe in God, but you just want to get like just an understanding of covenants and contracts and trust law, you need to read this, okay? I mean, I like to read the Bible in chronological order. It makes a lot more sense to me. It starts at Genesis, goes through Exodus, and then it goes to the book of Job. Then it picks up again, because it was the way it was written, the way whoever put the Bible together put it this way for their own purposes. And I'm positive there's a lot of things that are left out that we don't know about. But again, God gave us what we need to know, and what we need to know is that He created us for more than we're doing now. Okay, so if you take anything from this whatsoever, you are more than you think you are. I don't care if you're a man or a woman or a child, you were created to be unique, to be powerful, to be a son or daughter of a king, which makes you also kings and queens. You just got to learn who you are, learn to be that, and accept it and rule that way, okay? So if you go to a traffic court for some ridiculous seatbelt violation, you automatically feel like, well, it's the court, they're in charge of me, I better do what they say. And it's just the opposite. They're all liars and frauds and cheats, and they're all pirates. But you won't stand a chance if you don't know how to fight it, okay? So that's why you have to learn the things I've learned. And the things are out there. There's websites you can go to. Maybe I'll do some more about this, because it's such a convoluted, such a long, drawn-out, complicated process. I could not even scratch it. There's people who give seminars on this stuff that are 10 hours long, because there's so much to know, just the basics of it, okay? This system's been going on for a long time, at least since the early 1900s, okay? It deals with banking. That's what's going on in banking. It all has to do with banking. Banking is everything, okay? Banking is the courthouse. Banking is the post office. Banking is your city, your county clerk, your mayor. All this is banking. You're a citizen, or if that word breaks down to servant of a city, basically means that you are an employee of said corporation or service corporation, which means that you are under their authority. Okay, and free men and women aren't under anybody's authority except for God, and God gave us dominion over the air, the land, and the water right here. You have to just know it, you have to learn it, and you have to stand on it and be firm, okay? But it takes a lot of research, takes a lot of reading, takes a lot of wilderness expeditions to get the slavery mentality out of you. And listen, I'm not all the way there yet. I'm learning a whole lot here, and I have learned a lot. And a lot of people I've talked to think I'm insane, and it sounds so complicated that people just don't want to fool with it. But there's a way out. God always has a way out, okay? God made, a bunch of shepherds in a field, a huge, mighty nation that the whole world feared at the time, all right? He broke them all apart because they were a bunch of idiots after a while, and he told Moses, he said, at some point in the future, these morons are gonna forget who they are, start worshiping other gods, start marrying, heathen women and producing all kind of children that are heathens, and you're gonna have, this whole thing's gonna come undone. He called it. I mean, he was absolutely right, because this is exactly what happened. But God always has his people, his remnant, to bring the truth back, okay? And I am not so arrogant to think that I am one of God's remnant, but I am just echoing what I've listened to other people who I trust, what I've learned on my own, what I feel deep inside my gut. I can go off my discernment a lot, and a lot of what I've said in the past, people say, where'd you hear that? How'd you know this? And I say, well, I just know it. I can't sit there and always tell you I know something because I've been there or I've researched. I just sometimes know it, and then I get confirmation later on. Sort of like when I told you I felt like that city was a company, then I found out that it was. I knew it. So anyway, I'm gonna try to keep this thing under 30 minutes because I know people have lives to lead. Just want to be helpful, and we'll come back and do something else sometime soon. Have a great night.